All right. Should we get started again?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Jared, you had a question, buddy.
Oh yeah, I forget, but I did have another question for Joe. I was wondering if you started um your artistic passion while you're in recovery, or if how that all started.
Long before, I always liked to draw, paint, do anything artistic. Before I was in school, it was a really big outlet for me. When I was in that time of my life that was like really isolated as a child. So I kind of carried that into my teen years. I got into graffiti. I did a lot of street art. And then that carried into tattooing. I started seeing people around the graffiti scene with more tattoos and got intrigued by that culture. And I started tattooing quite young, actually. I was 15 when I started tattooing. I didn't work professionally as a tattoo artist until I was in recovery. And then as soon as I started working professionally, um, I very quickly knew that it was like what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
I know it in Kingston, you're a big name for tattooing. Everyone loves you.
Yeah, it's where I
Yeah,
Like
got
happens
my
too.
start.
yeah.
I have a question, Joe, and it's one of my favorite questions to ask people. You mentioned you have a son. So I had a daughter this year and planning like how I want to like approach talking to her about addiction and my personal recovery. I love asking guests how they communicate that with their children. So is this something you've been able to have a discussion with, or how do you plan on approaching it?
That's a really good question, and we talk about it often. So he's around all the time when we're openly talking about it between ourselves or with other people. We go to the online meetings, and he's often kind of in the background listening to the other people sharing and talking, and us sharing and talking. So he's somewhat familiar with I at least like the words around addiction and recovery. Um, I have talked to him specifically about it a couple times, and it's been at varying stages of his life, in varying ways, just so obviously he kind of understands it differently. But and each time I've been fairly honest without going into specific details. He'll ask, for example, about like beer or wine, or he'll see other parents of his friends drinking alcohol and stuff, and he knows that we don't. And we've said explicitly that the reason why we don't is because we had a problem with it in the past, and it caused a lot of struggle and hardship in our lives. And that's why we personally don't uh, drink. We haven't really talked too much about drugs yet. He's 8. Um, but I'm sure that conversation will come up as well. And we talk a lot also, Chris and I, about how we're going to deal with like him wanting to experiment as a teenager, and wanting to kind of just see what alcohol is all about. I know um my parents were quite strict and restrictive, and I definitely think that that fueled my like intense need to like try absolutely everything under the sun. So I think, considering that we've had these like conversations and he's already around the world of recovery a little bit, we don't want to enforce any like hard and fast rules about him following that same path. He's got to figure it out on his own. But if he were to ever get into a situation where he starts to realize that he might have a problem, or he's relying a bit too much on it, um unlike myself, he's going to have grown up around people talking about addiction and talking about resiliency, and the like positive life that comes after active addiction. And that was one of the big barriers before I was able to seek effective recovery was just not knowing how to talk about it, who to talk about it with, not knowing that there was anyone out there. So we try to make it really like open and easy for him to be a part of those conversations with us. Nothing's hush hush, nothing's kind of off limits. If he has any questions, we talk about it and answer it. We just kind of take it day by day with what his specific like needs are, I guess.
I think the important thing there is that he knows what goes on in a meeting. So he's listening to us in meetings. He's been to in-person meetings before for celebrations and that sort of thing. So if and when it becomes a place that he might need to go to himself, it's not going to be unfamiliar territory. It'll be a comfortable place where he knows he's accepted, and he knows it's like we want it to be part of the conversation always, that, you know, these places exist for exactly this reason, and there's no shame around going to a meeting, identifying as an alcoholic or an addict, changing yourself. Like, we want to always encourage all of those the pluses of recovery, and normalize the idea of like seeking help, getting treatment, doing, you know, regular meetings, and having, you know, our daily practice that allows us to live the life that we can live with him today.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for sharing that.
Speaking on normalizing, with social media nowadays, everything's normalized: drugs, partying, sex, alcohol, what you look like. How do you think you can kind of make people see that that shouldn't be normalized as much as it is?
Like using and drinking shouldn't be
Yeah.
normalized. I don't know that it shouldn't be normalized, because I think that there's always going to be people who do it, and it's always going to be a part of people's lives, but it affects different people differently. Like, you know, it might, the people who are able to kind of casually enjoy drugs and alcohol, that might be, that being normal to them is okay. It's just that what you don't see so many people being vulnerable and open about, I mean, I guess you do see more people being vulnerable and open about it now, but is when it goes too far, and when the casual and normal becomes a problem. I think it's not great that as a society people rely on substances or anything like gambling, sex, shopping, relationships, all that stuff for pleasure. But it's a huge part of life. It's like everywhere you look. And if you don't have an experience of going overboard with it, it's often tricky to find where that line would be. What do you think, Chris?
I can speak on that.
Okay.
Like, for as far as social media goes, for myself, I think that the thought that goes through my head every time I post something, or every time I'm like composing something that I want to post, is the attraction rather than promotion kind of motto. And I think that if, you know, I'm not online telling people they have to get sober, they have to live the way I live, but all I can do is share my story openly and honestly, tell people how bad it got, tell people what I did, and tell people how good it is today and what I still do today. You know, people are always going to be trying to normalize outrageous behavior or substances or whatever like that. But, you know, I think the discussion around recovery just has to be louder, and there has to be more people opening up and saying, you know what, this doesn't have to be an anonymous thing. I can talk about this because if I share with others, there's a good chance that somebody's going to grab a piece of what I've written or said and maybe give them that little piece of hope that they're looking for to change their life. And I think that's what social media should be used for. Like, I get it. Teenagers want to be seen out at certain places with certain people partying, doing certain things. But, you know, as life goes on, that narrative might change for them. And then at that point, I think it's their responsibility to say, what I was posting 5 years ago isn't me anymore, and this is how bad it got. This is what I've done to change, or this is, or even to reach out for help. Like social media can be used. Like Joe and I get messages all the time from people saying like, we appreciate what you guys share online. I think I might have a problem myself, or how did you overcome this thing, or my son or my daughter or my boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever I think that they have a problem. How do I approach that? So I think just keeping in that service mindset when like us as people in recovery are online is the most important thing that we can do to sort of change that narrative.
Love it.
I had a question for you guys on the relationship stuff, I guess. So maybe one of you could get into the benefits, and one can maybe get into challenges sometimes of, the two of you both being in recovery, having a partner that's also, in recovery. I'm sure there's a lot of benefits to that. And then maybe speak on a couple challenges if there are any.
I mean, the benefits far outweigh any challenges. I would start by saying that. I can't think of any actual challenges offhand, other than like, I don't know. I don't think that there is any. Like, I mean, it fosters an atmosphere of like openness and honestness, or honesty and vulnerability, where I can say things to her. I have a meeting at my, at in the next room at all times when I'm at home. This is a one addict talking to another, or one addict in recovery talking to another addict in recovery, which is a meeting. So, I mean, I can talk about how I feel, what I'm unhappy about with myself, that like we can just share about this stuff, and we don't have to go into great detail, and we also don't have to solve each other's problems. We know that like we're just here to support, and we're just here to to relate to each other, and to support each other through whatever kind of hardships or adversity that may come our way. And I will say that might be the one challenge, because I like to be a fixer. So when she's going through something, I'm like, well, you just have to do this, and it'll be fine. Like, how do you not see that? But
And I'm like, stop, just give me a hug.
She just wants a hug. And I don't realize that, because I think, oh no, like this is how it's like, it's not a sponsor-sponsee type relationship. It's just a symbiotic, honest relationship that way. And sometimes I kind of blur that line a little bit, where I think, well, she's telling me a problem, she's obviously looking for an answer, but really, I have to, that's been my challenge along the way. At least I have to identify that I'm not here to solve a problem. I'm here to support and love. And, like she said, like that's what she wants. She wants a hug. She doesn't want an explanation, and she doesn't want, a whole, plan of action. Yeah. And you can talk about what's wrong with me if you want.
Yeah, any challenges we face are challenges that anybody would face in a relationship, and they definitely aren't drawbacks that are related to being in recovery. But because we're both in recovery, I think we're more well equipped to handle those issues. Like, just speaking on myself, in previous relationships when I wasn't in recovery, I was super reactive. I like was very dependent on the other person's like emotions and well-beings during the whole entire relationship. I didn't think for myself. I prioritized the wrong things. And in recovery, it puts so much emphasis on prioritizing your own well-being, that it puts us both in a really good spot to be able to support the other person. And we both had fairly serious moments in our lives while we've been together, where we've gone through certain things. We both had diagnoses of PTSD while we were together, and going through that, each person had months sometimes that were extremely challenging on an individual level. And when there's two people that are in recovery, the ideal situation is that if one of them is struggling, the other one can be the support, and then when the roles reverse, the other person is able to take the reins in terms of being that support person when the other person's having their issues and stuff like that. So there's struggles, like everyone has those struggles, but recovery's kind of made it be a bit easier for us to like speak the same language and have the other person understand what you need, or be able to communicate a bit better, and also be able to personally understand possibly some of the emotions or feelings that the other person might be going through.
Yeah, and I think another thing about that is that like we kind of have had to learn how to like not take things personally when it gets bad for one person individually. Because like for myself, I had to go, I was 10 months, or rather 10 years sober, and I had to go back to treatment now for PTSD. My work, I was off work and was sent out to BC to do 12-week treatment, inpatient treatment plan. And Joe didn't think twice. Like most people, yeah, I like left for 3 months, and she was still working full time, keeping the house the way we normally would share, and then full-time mother duties. Like our son's birth father isn't in the area, so it's not a 50-50 thing or anything. We're it for him. So I was able to go and get my 3 months of treatment without having to worry about, is my wife going to be resentful of me? Is she going to be upset that I left her with all these responsibilities that I normally share with her? But I know that, and I was confident that she understands the benefit of treatment, and she made it very easy for me to be away, and I know it was difficult for her. So like just that give and take, where, and you didn't go to treatment or anything, but there's been months that have been tough, and I've tried to kind of take on more of the responsibilities and give Joe that space to heal or to go through what she needs to go through. So I think the understanding about that stuff and the importance of our individual mental health has been really, really beneficial in recovery. I don't think that not too many couples out of recovery, or that haven't gone through something fairly serious in their life and overcome some sort of adversity, could have the same understanding. And like Joe said, we speak the same language, basically.
I think it's
Yeah.
important to note as well that this is more recovery related and less relationship related, but it kind of makes sense. There's still, like, even though recovery is by far such a better way of living than inactive addiction, there's still like these emotional and mental struggles that you have to get through and work through and experience all the time. And there's for sure moments of like joy and happiness and fulfillment, and like a sense of community with other people in recovery, and even people who aren't, that you're just able to relate to better because you are present. But I'm sure you guys all know, like, it's not a walk in the park. Like, it's every day you're making a choice that hopefully supports your recovery. But we're all human, and it's not just this like constant upwards trajectory. There's days that are brutal to get through. Like, you have a lot of, or at least both of us have a lot of emotions to sift through on a regular basis. And I'm grateful to be able to sift through them instead of just like suppressing them or escaping in some way. But with that comes some rough patches from time to time. And if I was going through those rough patches with someone who couldn't relate or wasn't in recovery, I'm sure I would be met with a lot more conflict. And like Chris mentioned, we've both learned to not take that personally when one or both of us is going through something. And because we don't take it personally, it doesn't turn into an argument that lasts for days or weeks or months. It's just, it's usually quite a quick turnaround where the other person's able to process what they're going through, with or without the other person's help, but always with the other person's support. And that's a massive benefit.
Do you guys ever find, like, when you have those really bad days or rough patches, when you get through that, it feels so good, and then you're kind of thinking, I'd rather have these terrible days than the next 30 years of the life I used to live, kind of thing?
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
And like, what is the saying? Like, the worst day in recovery is better than the best day in active addiction, right?
Yeah.
I haven't got what? Did I mess it up?
No, you said the right thing. I just had something else to say after.
Yeah, I mean, personally, like I couldn't imagine living a life any differently than this anymore. I mean, it just I spoke about it with a friend earlier today. It's like, I'm getting older, and I'm a bit cranky if I don't get 8 hours of sleep and like my right amount of coffee in the morning. Um, and like I could, and that can mess my whole day up. I couldn't imagine trying to navigate a day at like 44 years old with a hangover and being like severely depressed from partying for days on end with no sleep. Like, it just, there's no way I couldn't fathom the life anymore.
And what I was going to say is that it really puts things in perspective, because I'll be having like a total breakdown about the fact that I have, like, the house is messy and I've got like so much things to do, which are all amazing things. And then I think back to like 12 years ago, and I was like, had a needle in my arm and craft dinner in like a motel fridge, and like no money to my name, and wasn't freaking out that badly. I still somehow was tricking myself that life was okay. So it's like, you gotta just like think back and put things in perspective, because yeah, like, yes, it's so easy to get caught up in all those little things that can be hard. And anyone who has like children also knows like the stressors that kind of come along with just raising someone, another human. And it helps so much to have such a drastic like perspective of things, to make myself feel better about the situation that we're in today.
Yeah, I like that, because you can be like, oh, my kid's screaming or whatever. You're getting all stressed out. Then you can be like, well, look what I was doing 10 years ago. This is way better. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. For me too, it's like I get, it was an adjustment. Like, I'm a stepfather, and it was an adjustment. I was by myself before then. And, I have these moments of like, oh my God, there's too much going on in the house. Everything's a mess. The kid's screaming. He's freaking out. He's on his screen too much. Joe's not having a good day, whatever. And then like I can actually bring myself back and go, okay, I have a roof over my head. I have somebody who loves me. I get to, have a part in raising a child. And, and I don't have to go and search for an escape from that. That's actually that's what I was craving. That's the inclusiveness and the acceptance that I was craving my whole life. So what do I have to complain about?
Joe, you mentioned Chris took you to, say, your first meeting. Is that something you guys have continued to do together, or are you still taking part in meetings and this far in your recovery?
We didn't continue to go to AA meetings regularly. We had a long distance relationship for a couple of years, and then we moved in, or I shifted to St. Catharines, where Chris has lived in 2020, early 2020. And right after that was when COVID kind of started to take over. So we were housebound for a lot of that first stretch of our time, like living together full time. So around that time, Chris actually found this program called Refuge Recovery. Maybe you can talk a bit more about Refuge Recovery. in a second. I guess we started attending those meetings online and eventually started one ourselves. And so we've shifted a little bit more in that direction.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I like Joe was saying before, like our early days in recovery were quite a bit different. Like I dove headfirst into 12-step meetings, and and those meetings saved my life. The fellowship that I had in those meetings were like second to none for a lot of years. And then things started to get weird for me around the rooms. I don't know if you guys can relate to like 12-step meetings in small towns. It gets a little incestuous and like high schoolish, and there's a lot of chatter for no reason. And I really felt like in my area, at least, the meetings were they were more about like, people gossiping and people talking and people trying to like meet up and hook up at the meeting rather than like getting into the work. I didn't see many people doing like sponsoring people anymore. I wasn't sponsoring as many people as I had been in the past. And then I had a very, very strange thing happen. Like one of my ex sponsors like started to spread all sorts of like awful stuff about me that was very untrue. So I kind of stepped back from the 12-step rooms, and that gave me kind of space to seek out other venues for recovery. And I looked at smart meetings. I tested kind of like, I went to different meetings in different cities or online or whatever. But then when I found this Refuge Recovery, I had always heard about it. I read this guy's book, Noah Levine. He's the guy who kind of started the program, and I read his book, and I loved his story. I could really relate to a lot of it. He was an old like punk rock kid, and that's what I was into. And he got really fucked up early in life. Then he got sober in jail. His dad was a meditation, like a very like a Buddhist, and I believe is a meditation teacher, and he encouraged Noah to start meditating in jail. And then he got out, stayed sober, kept meditating, and he kind of married the two, like the Buddhist set of principles and beliefs with like a 12-step like structure. So and came up with this Refuge Recovery, which is like been honestly for us, it's been exactly what we needed. The meetings are fantastic. The people that come out to the meetings are great. We've met a lot of fantastic people. It's very like meditation, mindfulness heavy. There is a set of inventories that you do with a mentor. So a mentor will be like what a sponsor would be in a 12-step meeting. There's a lot of the structure is a lot is aligned with a 12-step meeting, but there's a lot of the stuff that I didn't that didn't sit right with me about 12-step meetings that got right with Refuge for me. And that's not to say anything bad about 12-step meetings, because as I said, those meetings saved my life and those people saved my life. Had it not been for those meetings, I truly don't think I'd be here today. So massive credit to those meetings and to the people that are keeping the 12-step rooms open. But for us, this is just the direction we wanted to go. And it's been great. It's a great addition to our life. And having this regular Wednesday meeting that we put on has been great too, because it gives us some accountability. It keeps us connected to the group and the program. We get to meet amazing people. It's an online meeting, so there's people logging in from all over the world. So we see a lot of familiar faces, but a lot of new faces all the time too. And a lot of people are coming over from 12-step meetings to do Refuge as well. And I will still go to a 12-step meeting here and there. Like I'll log on to one online. I don't necessarily go to the local meetings. But if I'm away and I need a meeting, like I know there's a meeting in any city that I'm in. So yeah, I don't discount anything of it. But for us, yeah, the Refuge meetings have been what's sat well with us.
And just to clarify for anyone that wants to check it out, because I know I'm not that sharp, but I was a little confused when I was on there and just seeing like all the online meetings and then seeing like the different countries and areas. And you can go to whatever you want and whatever the title is of the meeting, right? You can kind of start wherever.
Yeah, you can start wherever. I mean, we would suggest probably buying the book, and you know, you can get that through the website or through Amazon or whatever if you need it quicker. And then refugerecovery.org, and if you go to the meetings section, it'll tell you you can choose online meetings, and it'll tell you all the meetings all over the world. And the only thing you got to pay attention to is the time zones. A lot of the meetings are out on the West Coast because the program was kind of born in California. So there's a lot more meetings on the West Coast than out this way. So you just have to marry up the time zones to what would work for your area. And yeah, they're great. They're great. Like I would suggest anybody who's in recovery or thinking about recovery to log on there and check it out. And the nice thing about the online meetings is you don't have to turn your camera on. You don't have to turn your microphone on. You can be an observer. All are welcome. It's not there's not a qualification to come to a meeting. So it's not a drug specific meeting or an alcohol specific meeting. It's a very inclusive meeting.
Is your meeting open to anyone?
Yeah, Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time.
Awesome. Guys, my last question for you, that's not true. I do have a question on day-to-day. What do you guys do, like recovery-wise, on a day-to-day basis, whether it be journaling, meditating, working out? What does it look like for you guys?
It changes slightly depending on what we have going on, but some constants are the meetings. We really put focus on those. Reading or listening to audiobooks of some kind, trying to ingest other people's stories of recovery, and stay connected to other people in the recovery community. And then for myself, paying attention to things on the physical side of life. So like movement, exercise. We both train Muay Thai. I train MMA as well, and I've really incorporated that movement into a big part of my recovery, as well as paying a lot of attention to like eating habits and physical health. We've noticed, or I've noticed specifically over the last couple of years, like a really direct parallel to the effects of the childhood trauma kind of coming out through like physical symptoms. And there were things that I thought I had addressed that came to light because I was having these like physical symptoms kind of come into play, like panic attacks, digestive issues, that sort of stuff. So on a day-to-day basis, making sure that I'm nourishing myself properly with food, the right like external content, whether it be like listening to someone or reading something or going to a meeting, and also having some sort of matching like external output, if I'm like talking to someone or incorporating that martial arts training into my day. I try to find a balance of those things.
Yeah, as well. I mean, we do, so we mentor people as well in the program. And so we have, I mean, myself, at least I speak with my mentor at least 2 or 3 times a week. So I stay connected that way. We have, and we both have people that we work with as mentors. So that's, you know, obviously good for our recovery as well. And yeah, I think like the exercise thing is huge for us. Meditation is huge, you know, practicing like mindfulness in anything we're doing, especially when it comes to like, you know, putting our phones away when we're playing with the kid, or like, you know, I can, you know, I can go fishing with my stepson and like make that a mindfulness practice, or I can, you know, and normally it gets away from me and I get stuck by a hook or something and I start swearing, but like I can bring it back to my breath at some point. Okay, it's practice, right? Like I have to learn that I don't know a thing about fishing and this kid wants to go fishing, so I gotta like mindfully navigate through this thing with him, and it becomes a practice rather than just like a task. And I think the stuff like that to carry through your whole day, and to know that like when things do get tough, when things feel overwhelming, you know, I can come back to my breath, I can meditate, I can reach out and call somebody. All those things are at my fingertips. Or, you know, I can just flip on an audiobook, or you know, I can, if I'm driving, I can listen to the Refuge Recovery book on audiobook, and just be listening instead of listening to music. I listen to something that's good for me, that's kind of feeding my soul and feeding my like emotional needs that way. And it helps bring me down. Or I can listen to, I mean, not necessarily when I'm driving, I won't listen to a meditation, but I mean, simple things like that. Or for me, you know, Joe said we do like boxing and Muay Thai. She does MMA, but like little things, like if I'm having a bad day, I love doing burpees. It's like my, like, I don't know if it's my little form of self-harm, but it's like, to me, that's like the most challenging thing that I can do. And when I'm having a tough day and things are getting really overwhelming, I'll do 100 burpees and like be listening to music while I'm doing it. And something so simple like that, it turns meditative, even though it's very taxing and very difficult. But it's like I'm exercising some of the emotions out, and it gives me time to like focus in on like one thing, just bring me to the present, because all I'm worried about is getting through that. And for me, just a simple act like that, it it doesn't allow me to stress about the past or the future. It keeps me in the present. And simple things like, and I can do that wherever I go. I mean, I might look like an idiot doing burpees if I'm on my way into a wedding or something, but if I need it, I can do it. It's there with me at all times. Same with meditation. Yeah, those are just like little things. And of course, all the regular, I mean, the stuff that Joe said, of course, too.
I find it funny how take for granted a long time, like sleep and water, and how much that just simple things like that can help you throughout a day too, right? I find I'm like, I don't know, it's
Big time.
throws me off pretty easily with a little bit of lack of sleep.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how, like I kind of mentioned before, how we lived before, you know, with no sleep, and you know, the only liquid that we were ingesting was like in the form of alcohol. So just living this totally like mindless, dehydrated, like deprived lifestyle. And now it's like, if I don't drink, like you've seen me a couple times drink this giant jug of water, it's like if I don't drink 6 liters of water in a day, I'm like, I wake up in the middle of the night like I need to drink something. I wouldn't drink 6 liters of water over 6 months in active addiction.
Yeah, the sleep thing is huge. Everything changes if you don't get a good night's sleep. We've been trying to focus more on that as well, just because we notice how big a change it makes. And that it all feeds into the other aspects, like being well exercised and fed helps with the sleep, being outside helps with the sleep, being off the screens helps with the sleep, being more connected and in the present moment helps us like fall asleep faster. And it just like kind of all of these I guess like pillars of recovery just really all kind of plug into each other at some point.
I have one quick question before we maybe let you guys get going, and it's just a quick one for Joe. You guys are talking about Muay Thai, and now you're talking about MMA. Have you fallen in love with more like jiu-jitsu now, or you just love all different aspects?
I love all of it. Muay Thai, I've been doing Muay Thai, I think since I think it was like around 2016 when I started training Muay Thai. It's definitely my first love in terms of martial arts. I had tried a jiu-jitsu class when I first started getting into the Muay Thai, and it was just too much for me to understand, and I decided to focus on the Muay Thai, and it was definitely like I wouldn't be exaggerating if I say it like had a part in helping me save my life. And so when gyms were locked down with the first waves of COVID, I had a friend and ex MMA fighter who was doing some private training with Chris and I, and he also has a lot of experience with jiu-jitsu and grappling. And I was just looking to try something new. There was no fights on the horizon because everything was locked down. So I felt comfortable stepping away from Muay Thai a bit. And I definitely fell in love with the ground game. Where I train right now at Niagara Top Team, there's a heavy wrestling and jujitsu focus, as well as the striking, of course. And it's been very, very addictive and fulfilling to like learn all that there is to understand with like the added element of the ground game, because it changes everything. It adds so much more to the arsenal when it comes to fighting. So it's been super, super fun to start to learn that, and I definitely do love it. But I would say striking is my comfort zone.
Who wins on the ground between you two? Does Chris muscle his way through it, or
He
Not probably not. I don't grapple one bit. I'm like, I have no interest with anything on the ground. I'm like, if I can punch, kick, knee, and elbow things, that's my happy place.
and he would beat me up. But
Yeah, I wouldn't let her take me to the ground, probably.
Yeah.
No, I mean, she's really good. I've watched her at a jujitsu tournament that she won, and I watch her train with like super high level like UFC fighters and very, very like skilled technical people, and they're friends of mine as well, and they always give me the feedback that like, I can't believe she's only been training for like a year or whatever it's been now. They're like, she's a natural. It used to piss me off, actually. Every time I used to go to like any gym, it's like, oh my God, your girl, she's a natural, she's a beast, she's this and she's that. And I'm like, well, what about me? Like, I was like, and they're like, yeah, you're okay, but like your girl, she's
Chris, I had one more question for you.
Sure.
Did you ever reach out to Terry and kind of say thank you for planting that seed back in the day?
Yeah, so he ended up okay. So I was getting tattooed by his son for a bunch of years, and I knew it was his son, and we just kind of had never talked because I was at that time still in active addiction. Then when I did get sober, I started to talk about it with his son, and he's like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. My dad would be so proud of you." And he had moved out to Nova Scotia. He had retired and moved. And I was like, well, tell him I said hi, like update him if you want and whatever. And then um I just kind of had forgotten about it, and I hadn't like been in touch with him at all. And one day I booked a tattoo appointment, and I showed up at the shop, and I walk in, and Terry's standing there, and he's like, just like open arms, like, come here, give me and he just like bear hugged me. He's like, I am so proud of you. I've never stopped thinking about you. I can't believe that you finally made the decision. And he's like, what are we do? Like, what are you doing right now after the tattoo? Let's go get a coffee. And, he let me do what he did for me. And I told him my whole story and where I was at the time. And so funny thing, and I was working a schedule that I had a lot of time off. I worked for the fire department, right? And he said, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, nothing. I'm off for like the next 5 days. And he goes, okay, I'll pick you up at 5 a.m. You're coming out to Nova Scotia with me. And I was like, what do you mean I'm coming? He's like, no, you don't have a choice. You're coming. It'll be you, me, and the dog in the pickup truck. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I packed a bag. And like, this is probably like 3 or 4 months into recovery. So I was like still fresh, still kind of like, I was right into it. And he would say things to me. So he picked me up, and, whatever that is, like a 20-hour drive. It was like recovery talk for 20 hours with the guy who had showed me the rooms for the first time, who, like I said, I credit him with my life, because he opened the door to recovery for me, and he made it possible for me to walk through that door for the first time. And he would say things to me like, I've never, like, you were so full of shit before, you'd lie to me all the time. He's like, I'm so happy to hear you talk like that. And he doesn't like pull punches. He's like a very to the point guy. And he's like, I knew every time every time your lips were moving, you were just full of shit, you were lying, you were this. And he was like, you're the typical AA kid, and like popping in and dipping out and all this stuff. And And he's like, but I've never seen you like this, and this makes me so happy. So he brought me out there. I stayed out on the East Coast for like 3 days with him and his wife. He brought me to a meeting out there, and on the way to the meeting, he goes, it's a speaker meeting, so have you been to one? And I was like, yeah, I like speaker meetings, they're good. And he's like, okay, cool. And then like he pulls up and we walk in, and I start shaking some hands, and he goes, oh, by the way, you're the speaker. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I was like, so and that's just like him, right? He threw me to the wolves and just said like, hey, I'd never spoke from the podium before, and it was like, his home group in Nova Scotia, and he was like, proud to have me there. And he just said like, the kid's speaking, I don't care who is supposed to speak, he's speaking. And it was awesome, it was amazing. Like they made it so nice for me. Anyways, that was a beautiful connection with him, and his wife and his whole family are just like fantastic people that unfortunately Terry passed away about 5 years ago. And I always keep him close to my heart, because as I said a number of times, like that guy did for me what nobody was willing to do at the time. And he offered his hand when things were the very worst that they could be for me. And he saw, and he truly did that. Attraction, not promotion. He didn't tell me I had to go to do anything. He said, if and when you're ready, I can help you. And he let me come to him. So yeah, I love the guy, I love him. Like, he saved my life.
And that was awesome.
Thanks.
I actually got one more thing. I keep saying it, but sorry. I seen you're launching your own podcast, and
Yeah.
listeners want to tune in. Can you give us a little bit about it and kind of talk about that a bit, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. So this is the backdrop behind us here. It's called the Authentic Adversity Podcast. I don't know if you can see we're moving
Sweet.
at the same time.
That's sick.
Yeah, Joe designed it. This is a benefit to marrying a tattoo artist. Yeah. So I wanted to start a podcast because I've over the 11 and a half years I have in recovery, I've met some very remarkable people with some wild stories, and they become very near dear friends to me. So anywhere from like authors to fighters to firefighters, tattoo artists, like business people, all like just there's musicians, just a whole gamut of really interesting, wild stories that I believe kind of the world needs to hear. And kind of came to me as we were in Austin, Texas, and we were talking to a friend of ours that has a really great story that is going to be one of my first guests. And I said, like, man, your story is so powerful. Like, you got to get this out there. And he's like, I know, I just don't know how. And I just got thinking about it. I thought, well, why don't I just try to do this? I've got so many friends that have very inspiring stories about overcoming adversities in life, and changing things up and living in their truth, I guess. So that's what I want to highlight. I want to basically do stories, real, genuine, honest stories from the heart. I want people to talk about the emotions that are attached to the things. I don't care necessarily, like, yeah, the things that happened were crazy and wild, but I want to know, how did that feel? I want to know the gritty details about, like, what was going on in your mind, what was your emotional state, what was your mindset back then, what were you telling yourself? Like, the stuff that I believe people need to hear about. And so my hope with the podcast is that simply it's an act of service that I hope somebody can hear something that they can relate to, and that it can give them a little piece of hope that if somebody can change the way my guests will tell their stories, that possibility is in it, is there for all of us. And that that I just want to kind of spread a message of hope that way.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Hey, we're very happy you took the time of your day to join us. And guys, you got any more questions?
I feel like we could go for a couple more hours, but maybe cut it off now, I guess. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having us. This was really fun, and it's great to meet you guys.
Yeah, it was great to meet
Yeah.
you guys as well. And
It
we
was-
wish you all the best. Tune in, check out Chris's podcast. Guys, if you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please reach out and ask for help. Thanks for listening.